On behalf of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade and Newland Global Group Australia, it is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the launch of the 7th edition of the Australia-India Case Compendium.
Great satisfaction and pride that initiative we took over a 1.5 years back, that we could bring out this compendium of the case studies, although the work was going on in the background, but I compliment the entire team who worked so hard under very active involvement of Natasha and Kirti, Dr. Kirti, so that over 30 students of IIFT were involved, 30-40 students were involved, about a dozen to half a dozen faculty, and they worked very hard in lot of interaction, collecting secondary data, interacting with these data, and then a lot of stakeholders, the case studies, what have come, and as you are aware that India and Australia are very key partners. We have come a very long way. We are democratic countries with a very independent, judiciary. India is less than half the size of Australia in terms of the area, but in terms of population, we are 54 times more than Australia, and therefore, the sustaining India is very, very challenging, and despite limited resources, India has demonstrated to the whole earth that our economy, with somewhere between 6.6 or 7.2, whatever the data is, fastest growing large dynamic economy on the earth. When the world growth rate is 2%, 3%, US growth rate is 2.2%, Australia, I don't want to tell, but it is generally less than 2%. But Indian economy is growing at 6.6. And this is what I think, we need to learn. The whole world needs to learn from India in demonstrating and transforming challenges into opportunities, and we are demonstrating. India, Australia, ECTA that we signed, Economic and Cooperation and the Trade Agreement, on 2nd of April 2022, operationalized in December 2022, and from 1st of January 2026, all Indian products, almost 100% are duty free in Australia. And similarly, it's a big market access for the Australian firms. Market access to Australian firms of a market, fastest growing market, the market with 1.26 billion people, and an economy which is probably economy of the future. In 2026, forget about the law, India economy is going to contribute to 70% of the world growth, wherein America is going to contribute only 9%. So it is the market where everybody is focusing on, and as Ambassador was saying that we are in the turbulent times, most turbulent times than ever before, and therefore, and most of you are WTO is almost if I don't say dysfunctional, the dispute settlement body is dysfunctional, but otherwise the multilateralism is facing a very challenging time today, and therefore countries are coming up with plurilateral and bilateral agreements. In terms of the bilateral agreements, we have demonstrated that after the problem started, uncertainty, and uncertainty is very certain in time to come. India, we signed an FTA with UK, we signed an FTA with Oman, and we are very happy to have Madam Petal, she has been the chief negotiator of the India-New Zealand FTA, signed in record time of 9 months. After that, I think we signed mother of all agreements. India signed as 27 countries. Negotiating was very difficult, and probably it was the most complex, comprehensive agreement signed by India and even by UK. Australia, we already signed. Anyway, I hope that time, a lot of in the papers that it's a win-win deal, and you know how it is win-win deal. And, success demonstrates success. And therefore we signed, and you are aware that we also signed agreement, or reached at a deal with the largest economy on the earth. Australia is very important for India because I think who knows better than you that over 900 thousand people of the Indian origin. People in Australia, they have contributed a lot to the wealth of Australia. People in Australia have helped taking out Australian business abroad. And ECTA, thank you so much for being part of this. I'm highly, grateful and thankful to Mr. 𝐂𝐮 for this stewarding or taking leadership of this initiative. Time is short, but I will talk later when I come. But I can thank you so much for being in IIFT and get it again, going to Natasha, because she reached us and we found having a collaboration and but this is where we are demonstrated. And I am highly grateful to various persons, including especially Shri Mukul, who have helped us, in getting data and getting us in touch with the various companies. I also thank all those companies for whom we have written these case studies, who have interacted with us, who have interacted my faculty, my team, my students, and we could do this. And I wish that the center will strengthen. We talked, we wrote about Australia. We'll also take more things to New Zealand, the UAE, and maybe much more countries. So I think it was the first thing, case study, Compendium, which we came out of the center. Thank you so much, Namaskar, and welcome to all of you in IIFT. Have a nice day.
CEO, Newland Global Group, Mr. 𝐂𝐿𝐴. Mr. 𝐂𝐿𝐴 is a leading authority on Australia-India economic engagement with nearly 3 decades of experience at the intersection of trade, investment, and public policy. He is the founder and CEO of Newland Global Group, Australia's foremost bilateral advisory firm, advising governments, corporates, and institutions on market entry, policy alignment, and cross-border execution across the Indo-Pacific. A graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, he is widely recognized for aligning commercial strategy with geopolitical and regulatory realities. Under his leadership, NGG has enabled over 300 enterprises from ASX and NSE listed companies to high-growth SMEs to successfully enter and scale across the Australia-India corridor. A frequent speaker at global forums, Mr. 𝐂𝐿𝐴 is equally committed to social impact through his leadership of Anupam Mission Australia, supporting healthcare, education, and inclusion initiatives in underserved communities. With deep institutional trust, boardroom credibility, and cross-cultural fluency, Dipendra 𝐂𝐿𝐴 continues to play a pivotal role in shaping Australia-India economic and strategy engagement. Mr. 𝐂𝐿𝐴, I now invite you to share your opening remarks. Sir.
Thank you for that wonderful intro. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to acknowledge the dignitaries who are here with us today. His Excellency Bilateral, Australian High Commissioner to India, Ms. Petal, Dhillon, Joint Secretary to Ministry of Commerce, welcome. Mr. Pradeep Mehra, Secretary General for 𝐂𝐻𝐿, Ambassador 𝐈𝐧𝐿𝐴𝐚, Ambassador 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐬𝐬, a great friend of ours, Mukul, who is the Minister of Commercial General Manager and Head of Australia South Asia, and Dr. Petal. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's an exciting moment for Australia-India relations privileged to welcome you all here for the India launch of the second edition of the Australia-India Business Compendium, entitled Pitch Perfect, Australia-India Perfect Conditions for a 100 Billion Partnership. The compendium marks a culmination of 18 months of rigorous work, a project that's involved a deeply structured 33-question research framework, one-on-one interviews with participating countries, extensive primary research through corporate disclosure, financial data, and trade flows, extensive secondary research across government policy, sector reports, bilateral economic data sets. In our opinion, and we've been in this sector for quite a long time, this is without exaggeration the most comprehensive evidence-based business literacy document ever produced between Australia and India. Our partnership with this compendium would not exist without the extraordinary support of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, which is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Their intellectual rigor, policy alignment, and academic discipline has shaped this publication into a strategic resource that speaks to business, government, and industry alike. I'd also like to acknowledge the Egypt companies for which there are 30, our institutional, strategic partners and ecosystem collaborators, which are also another 30, across both nations. Their contributions have strengthened the sectorial depth of this edition, which spans across technology, innovation, trade, market entry, advanced manufacturing, and energy transition. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge my MGG team, especially our project director, Natasha Jabaska, whose leadership, research discipline, and commitment has driven this compendium from concept to completion. We also have Rehan and Arshil here, somewhere in the room, where are you guys? These guys have done a lot of analytical work for us as well, and they're based in Delhi, so thank you. Why is this edition important, and why does it matter? Over the past few years, we've witnessed the extraordinary shift in the Australia-India economic relationship, and this compendium captures this shift with clarity and precision. And the key findings, I'll just mention a few key findings. Two-way trade surged 43% in 2024, reaching $49.1 billion. At a current rate, the 100 billion milestone could arrive before 2030. Post the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, the ECTA, entrants recorded 3.8 times faster traction in export growth compared to pre-ECTA. Over 70% of the companies surveyed identified the IIFT as a decisive turning point for market entry. 92% of companies featured now operate in both markets, which is demonstrating that the aspiration is now becoming a reality. For every $1 million of exports, approximately 6.25 new jobs are created. There's some really wonderful data here that has come out of this research. It's worthwhile really having a look at. I guess these results are not theoretical. They're real measurable indicators of fast evolving economic relationships. We grappled with the name of this compendium, and we thought we'd think with the help of the Consul General in Sydney, we came up with the idea of perfect. It's an analogy, and the name Pitch Perfect is drawn from the sports that find both foundations together. A batter's performance is shaped by the pitch, its bounce, its pace, its predictability. same applies to business. This compendium provides the conditions, the insights, and the signals that allow Australian and Indian companies to read the pitch and play the long innings. It identifies the sectors growing fastest, the states driving industrial transformation, the policy levers shaping market access, and on-the-ground realities companies must navigate. It's a map, a benchmark, and a guide to build on evidence. One of the clearest messages emerging from this research definition is the importance of concluding the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation Agreement with CETA. The IIFT has been a catalyst, and the CETA will be the structural anchor. CETA will lock in certainty, reduce long-term risk, deepen services and investment integration, and elevate the corridor to a strategic, not just a transactional partnership. The data shows that the momentum is already here. CETA will amplify and accelerate the path to $100 billion trade by 2030. The 30 companies featured in this edition are divided across 4 key themes that include trade and market access, technology and innovation, energy transition, and advanced manufacturing. These companies represent diversity of thinking, resilience of strategy, and ambition that fuels bilateral growth. Their stories reveal how innovation travels between our markets, how Indian states are becoming more global manufacturing hubs, how Australian companies are scaling faster through India's digital and talent ecosystems, how energy transition is driving new forms of cooperation, and how universities, global capability centers, and corporates are shaping knowledge flows. These are just not isolated success stories. They're signposts for what is possible. As we launch this edition here in Delhi, I want to emphasize a couple of important messages. One is that this compendium is only the beginning of a much larger journey. Secondly, as mentioned by Professor Joshi, there are a number of trade agreements that have currently been signed by India. Now, they're still to be ratified or signed, with the Australian ECTA, which was signed in April 2022, but was ratified and went into effect in December 2022. What we've got here is a evidence-based story of companies that are already operating in New India, in contemporary. So we still have an advantage from an Australian perspective to take advantage of the ECTA and, as we talked about, the CETA going forward. So there is a definitive advantage for us still to take advantage. What we have created is not just a publication. It's a living blueprint of the next phase of the India-Australia economic relationship, a partnership built on evidence, guided by policy, strengthened by institutions, and driven by businesses that have the courage to take the first step. To everyone here, thank you for your continued leadership, your trust, and your commitment to shaping the India-Australia corridor. On behalf of Newland Global Group, I'm honoured to officially launch the second edition of the Australia-India Business Case Study Compendium, titled Pitch Perfect, Australia-India Perfect Conditions for a $100 billion partnership. On that note, I'd like to invite some dignitaries to officially launch the compendium. Do we have the books available?
the Indian side based on the word 𝐴𝐾𝐿, which is the unity at its core. Unity is what modern trade nowadays needs and must achieve between our nations. Unity of purpose, of partnership and growth, and of shared prosperity for the next generation. I'm here today and I'd like to mention that our former secretary, Rajesh, is going to come to. So on his behalf, I am commending IIFT and under Professor Joshi's leadership for anchoring this initiative. IIFT today for us stands as a knowledge asset in India's trade ecosystem, and it is nurturing students to become future economic and business leaders, not only in India but also globally. It's perfect with a compendium of case studies of business collaboration between India and Australia, and knowledge that speaks simultaneously to policymakers and thus to industry leaders and to the classrooms.
I want to extend a special thanks
To the Newland Global Group, with Natasha and the entire team member this is a great initiative and I think the purpose of this particular. I hope we can carry this forward to other countries as well. It will be a very helpful exercise. The India-Australia Business Case Studies Compendium has actually brought alive stories of many companies. It offers a very interesting read and a very diverse set of fields that are being covered, from healthcare, technology, education, logistics, critical minerals, and even scaling and robotics have been successfully brought together. The cases illustrate the market entry strategies and the innovation which has been done to make sure that the model works across different countries. We read about the company's background, what motivated them to do what they did in the partner market, the growth strategy which was adopted, which has been very different for different companies, and most of all for us, people like us, it leaves us with less successful. What do we need to do going forward? Key insights have emerged on the strategic localization, the innovation followed, product adaptations to meet the local market needs, and the effective use of policy on the ecosystem behaviors. I'm quite sure that beyond India and Australia, other countries will also see inspiration from it, and it serves as a perfect guiding resource for many of the audience here and beyond. The India-Australia partnership is of course on this venture, and we may be competitors, but here we are fully collaborating in every way, under our FTA and under our economic partnership. When I was going through the compendium on the computer and on the internet, which is where I read it, it's interesting that ECTA has actually been cited as a turning point for delivering the advantages and greater investor confidence across, and having a smoother market entry, and I hope it continues to do that, because our partnership is essentially a complementarity on both sides of our talents, our resources, our technology, our innovation, and this compendium captures that convergence brilliantly, and it brings out the value that comes from having FTAs. Equally important are the insights, as I mentioned, that it has left us with, issues which have, still are the friction points, and from our perspective, we take this as a guidance for moving ahead on sustainability, innovation, mutual recognition of many of our standards in the next phase of our collaboration, which is ECTA. It's perfect as illustrated in this compendium that trade agreements can be enriched and what matters is practice. Agreements have to move beyond into the real world and actually deliver, which perfect has given us very good cases in that direction and left us with the thought that yes, the pitch is ready. It is well formed, and it is foreign. So as we move ahead, we both together, that is India and Australia, we need to go higher. With that, I want to congratulate the enablers of the study, the collaborators of the study, and the students, and all the 40 students from IIFT who participated. So congratulations to all of you and to Australia, and we keep this great partnership and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the remarks and valuable direction. I now have the honor of introducing our guest of honor, our chief guest, His Excellency 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, High Commissioner of Australia. High Commissioner Philip Green is a highly distinguished Australian diplomat with experience on 4 continents, having served as ambassador or High Commissioner to Germany, Singapore, South Africa, and Kenya. High Commissioner Green's distinguished career includes several notable contributions, including overseeing the implementation of Australia's Indo-Pacific strategy following its launch in 2017, leading the development of Australia's policy on the Quad between 2017 and 2019, and playing a pivotal role in concluding the enhanced strategic partnership with Germany, as well as the Australia-Germany Hydrogen Accord in 2021. Earlier in his career, he was instrumental in the conclusion of Australia's comprehensive strategic partnership with Singapore 2016, along with the upgrade of the Australia-Singapore Free Trade Agreement in the same year. Mr. Green was Prime Minister 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚's International Advisor between 2009 and 2010, and Chief to Staff to Foreign Minister between 2010 and 2012. He led the Secretariat for the Review of Australian Intelligence Agency in 2004. Mr. Green was awarded the Order of Australia Medal for his role in the response to the Bali terrorist tragedy in 2002. He is a graduate of the University of Sydney in Arts and Law. He holds honorary degrees from 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚 University and Woodruff University. Your Excellency, now I invite you to kindly deliver the inaugural address.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Namaskar, and from me, 𝐿𝐿. 𝐿𝐿 is the word in the language of the indigenous people from around our capital, Canberra, which means hello and welcome. And greeting you in this way, I'm demonstrating our respect for indigenous people from my country, this country, and all around the world. Thank you, Professor Lohan, Vice Chancellor, for your warm welcome and your thoughtful remarks this morning. To you, my colleague, Dhillon, on the other side of the negotiating table for ECTA, this is a very warm moment to celebrate our success in the past, but to think about the next phase and where we are going. To you, Dipen Rodani, and your group, including Natasha Jarpaska, thank you and congratulations for the second edition of this very valuable work. My old partner in crime, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, who has played such a huge role in the development of economic links between Australia and India. It's super to have you here, as well as Amit Dasgupta. Thank you very much for joining us. And may I say finally, but importantly, today in the audience we have our own head of the Australian Trade Commission for the whole of South Asia, Newland Global Group. It's a special week for us in the High Commission because every year on Australia Day, the 26th of January, the same day as Republic Day in India, on that day every year our Governor General issues national leave. And Newland was the recipient this year of Australia's public service. Professor Lohan, you began by saying that we live in turbulent times, an era of disruption, a time when the global order is uncertain. I guess my key message to you today is in this era of unprecedented uncertainty, there is at least one thing that we can be clear about. And that is that Australia and India are bound together in a partnership that will only grow and grow. we in Australia present ourselves to the region, and in particular to India, as a reliable partner. When other things are shifting around us, we were amongst the first country to realise the significance of India's growth to a leading partner in global affairs. That's why we had our first phase free trade agreement only a few years ago. And we continue on that pathway as a reliable and dependable partner for India. Now, for me, there are three underlying reasons why Australia has that posture. The first is that we are strategically aligned. We live together in the Indo-Pacific, an era and a field of great opportunity and economic prosperity, but one which could be upset by conflict and instability. And our Prime Ministers have set a goal of working together on a vision to keep our region stable and secure so that we can live in prosperity. The second reason why I believe that Australia-India ties will grow is that, yes, of course, India's economy is growing, as others have said. We recognise that, and every economy in the world is growing. But Australia is special for India because we're a neighbour, we're strategically aligned, and because our economies are highly complementary. We produce very few of the things that India produces in the mass market, and India produces very few of the things that we produce. Our economies are harmonic. The things that we are good at, energy, resources including critical minerals, skills and training, which India needs for the vast number of young people who need to be part of this growing economy, and high innovation, which can be globalized and scaled to India. That's the nature of the complementary character between our two economies. And the final thing, the third thing that is driving us together ineluctably is what Prime Minister Modi calls the human bridge. The now more than a million people of Indian origin born in Australia. Now, I'm conscious that the Indians in the audience, that a million people might not sound like me. Let me assure you, a million people is a lot of people in Australia. It's the fastest growing in Australia. And it's doing great things for our society, but also for our bilateral relationship. So, bilateral trade is benefiting from this strong engagement between us. It's also benefiting from the success of ECTA. Let me remind you that as of the 1st of January this year, tariffs for all goods produced in India entering Australia are zero. No exceptions. No exceptions, no asterisks, no fine print. Everything produced in India now enters Australia tariff and duty-free. And Indian exporters are taking advantage of this hugely. So, if you look at the last 5 years of India's exports, you find that India's exports to the world in the last 5 years have grown by 40%. That sounds good, right? But Indian exports to Australia in the same period have grown 200%. 5 times the rate at which Indian exporters are growing to the world. So Indian exporters, and that means jobs and profits right here in India, are benefiting hugely from our economic complementarity and from our free trade agreement. Let me give you a couple of examples. Over the last 3 years, automobile exports from Australia to India up 288%, electronics up 100%, agricultural goods up 35%, apparel exports up 20%. So India is benefiting hugely, and Australia is too. We're capturing much more of our fair share of India's growth. We calculate that Australian exports to India, excluding coal, are growing 4 to 5 times faster than India's exports to the rest of the world, from the rest of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a very good place, but we are not done yet. Our Prime Minister, in March of last year, launched one international economic report. He didn't launch a roadmap for Australia-EU relations, although those are good. He didn't launch a roadmap for Australia-Japan economic relations, although that goes very well too. He launched a roadmap for Australia-India economic relationship, identifying 4 sectors above all others which have huge potential: green energy, agriculture, tourism, and education. In all of these fields and many more, our relationship is bound to succeed. As Ms. Dhillon said, now is the time for us to focus on the next phase of our partnership, which will be ECTA, a comprehensive agreement. And we are now up for negotiating directly to upgrade ECTA into that sort of comprehensive agreement, which will unlock even more trade and investment. So, at the macro level, the situation is very good. But this Newland report gives us specific case studies and on-the-ground experience of what it is like and how companies are succeeding in their partnership between India and Australia. Let me give you a couple of examples. So the report tells us about 𝐸𝐴 extracts. So 𝐸𝐴 is a Ghaziabad company making wellness products from biological extracts. It's part of the huge and growing Indian industry in wellness products. They saw in ECTA and the removal of tariffs on herbal extracts to look for Australia as a market. Now, they've partnered with an Australian firm that can help them navigate the regulatory requirements of the Australian system, and as a result, their exports to Australia have grown 10 times in just 3 years. On the Australian side, I want to talk about a firm called 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐴. I engaged just last month with their CEO, 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, who's had huge growth in his product in the last 5 years in the United States and is now looking at India as a major market. So, what does 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚 do? They produce specialized steel forms for making bridges quickly, cost-effectively, and including in very complicated and challenging environments. Their work is based on 130 patents that they hold in 60 countries. They have developed a partnership with Tata Steel to bring their innovation to India and help this country develop in its massive search for new and more effective infrastructure. Already they have built more than 200 bridges, which brings me to my final point. We are all in the business of building bridges, and to you today, this volume today is a further bridge that we are building between Australia and India. We were an early mover in our engagement with the India economy. We see that a number of others are following suit. That's a good thing. Competition is always good. But as I said at the start, we remain committed to the Indian economy, and the Australian government is determined to ensure that we make the best advantage of our complementary skills. Now, I have to admit that I got one part of your report wrong. So, you tell me today that Pitch Perfect is about cricket. Fine by me. I thought it was quite silly. Because we think about perfect pitch. We think about being in tune with each other. We think about singing harmonically. We think about our great soloists, Prime Minister Albanese and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who are bringing forward a beautiful song. All of us should sing along with the chorus. I invite you to join the song. Thank you very much.
Strengths are already embedded in India's growth story. For more than 2 decades, Australian companies have brought world-class capabilities in these sectors and have made it work at scale. Education remains one of the key sectors, and I'm glad that Ravi Lochin from Global Reach is joining us today as well. Has played a major role in the education sector. And what's important is that Australian companies have not done so by chasing volume. They export what Australia does best. For many of you, it's important to understand, and I know that generally there's a huge market perception around Australia that it's a small market, the numbers are small. Let's understand the value proposition, what Australia offers. Australia, what it does best is regulatory discipline, operational rigor, trusted institutions, and long-term capital. These case studies show Australian capability in action, tested in India, refined through complexity, and proven globally. Now, companies today are not short of opportunity. What they are selective about is where success actually compounds. So that is why the Australia-India corridor actually matters. Australia is not a volume market, it is a credibility market, one where compliance, governance, product quality, and delivery discipline are non-negotiable. Now, what this compendium shows is that companies succeed across this corridor not by treating these markets as opposites, but by understanding how different systems reward different forms of discipline. Across the 30 companies and 30 partners in the Australia-India corridor, we only asked one thing: tell us the truth. What worked, what stalled, and what nearly failed? And what would you do differently if you were starting again? One insight that came through consistently, that companies don't fail across the corridor because markets are hostile. They fail because they move too early with too little structure. Success is hundreds of disciplined micro decisions made early, made deliberately, and often under imperfect conditions. This compendium captures those decisions, not the polished versions, but the lived one, so companies on both sides of the corridor can move with clarity and build positions that last. This compendium also stands on the work of my extraordinary team, for which I'm extremely grateful. 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, our project execution specialist, 𝐻𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, our market analyst based in Delhi, the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade research team led by an outstanding group of management scholars under the focused guidance of Professor Preeti Tak and Arunima, and the leadership of Vice Chancellor Professor Joshi. The analytics team at Fornax, I see Rajesh joining us from Fornax team, for distilling and validating company data that all ensured depth and rigor. And most importantly, the challenge that our CEO took of entrusting us with this project and backing us and giving us the autonomy to run this at full speed. Now with that, let's turn to the work itself. A quick snapshot of the Australia-India case studies, business case studies compendium. What are the key insights that we should be aware of? So the first one around scope and method. Each case study is built on detailed questionnaires, primary interviews, and verified secondary research. The cases are structured consistently across 4 dimensions: context and opportunity, strategy and execution, impact and results, and lessons and insight. And it includes 30 companies operating in the themes of trade and market access, advanced manufacturing, energy transition, and technology and innovation. Each theme is also supported by a thematic primer to understand where each sector and theme stands for Australia and India. So you get an understanding of where Australia stands in advanced manufacturing and where India stands in advanced manufacturing, and similarly for other specific themes in tech innovation. And I also must acknowledge the key partners for each themes. For tech and innovation, we have NASSCOM and Tech Council of Australia as our partners. For advanced manufacturing, we have Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre and ACMA, the Automotive Components Manufacturing Association, Export Council of Australia, and FIO as our partners for trade and market access, and Smart Energy Council and Empowering Australia as our partners for energy transition. This edition is also the most collaborative we have ever produced. It brings together 30 partners and reaches more than 400,000 businesses through their networks and channels, industry channels. And since the inaugural 2023 edition, this particular project has engaged 56 companies and senior leaders across both nations, building a longitudinal view of what has changed between 2023 and 2025, and what really defines success in this corridor. How to enter, how to scale, and succeed in the corridor. Now, if you look at the key insights that's coming out of this particular report, when you put the data together, a very clear story emerges. IIFT has been a genuine catalyst. 70% of the companies say it reduced tariffs, it eased mobility, and accelerated post-pandemic growth. Two-way trade has grown from 43% to $49.1 billion, and exporters are scaling faster, with new companies growing at 3.8x and average firms growing 24% annually. Companies are gaining traction 25 to 30% faster, supported by redesigned operating models that include 92% now running joint operations and nearly 80% using hybrid onshore offshore delivery. The economic impact is tangible. Every $1 million in exports is creating over 6.25 jobs. So, looking at the target of $100 billion trade target by 2030, we need 12.6% of annual growth, and the data shows this is well within reach. If we look at the next slide, what are the key business models emerging in this particular corridor? Across the 30 companies, 4 business models dominate. Partnership models, joint ventures, co-manufacturing and licensing, which is allowing companies to combine technology, IP, and market access. The second model is around direct subsidiaries, giving companies full operational control and a long-term local footprint. Some choose acquisitions for instant scale, while others used distributors for fast and low-friction market entry. And increasingly, we are seeing a hybrid and licensing-led model for IP created in Australia, delivery in India, and local sales teams driving growth. Commissioner mentioned about 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐽, and 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐽 is one of these examples, IP created in Australia, and then partnering with Tata Steel, creating that manufacturing process in India. Now, what really are the growth hotspots in the corridor? Australia's exports to India and export strengths meeting India's fastest growing demand curves. Now, this matrix maps every major export category against two things: how deeply Australia is already present in the Indian market and how much growth potential still exists. So in the top left, we have the star opportunities. These are sectors where India's demand is rising sharply, but Australia is not yet fully present. So think lithium, hydrogen, processed foods, organic foods, baby food, packaging materials, water treatment technology. So this is where the first movers will define the market. On the top right are the growth champions, areas where Australia is already strong and India's demand continues to scale. So education, tourism, wool, cotton, iron ore, aluminium oxide, premium FMCG. The opportunity here is to innovate, protect share, and deepen collaboration. Bottom left is the potential opportunities. Emerging areas include biotech, precision medtech, aerospace components, defense equipment, 3D printing, quantum components, smart city solutions. These will need selective investment, testing, and advice. Australian companies fit naturally into that gap. And third, the next wave is going to be knowledge intensive: genomics, life science tools, quantum tech components, and carbon capture materials. These won't be high volume immediately, but they are high strategic value and position Australia inside India's long-term innovation radar. So when we look at this matrix, the message is very simple. The Australia-India export story is becoming more diversified, more specialized, and more future-focused, moving from traditional strengths to next-generation industries. And this is where the corridor is heading. Now, considering this is the second edition of the Compendium, it was important for us to draw a comparison where the companies were in 2024 and where they are in 2026. So we did a longitudinal analysis to see how the corridor today, and it looks very different from 2023. Companies are now entering with longer-term strategies, using India for R&D, technology transfer, and talent capabilities. Localization has deepened, not just for products, but in leadership, culture, and decision-making. Execution has become digital first, with mobile interfaces, UPI integration, WhatsApp support, and cloud systems designed for Indian users. IIFT is being used more intelligently, from tariff planning to rules of origin, optimization, and mobility pathways for service teams. And importantly, companies have a higher risk appetite, deploying capital earlier and with greater confidence in the corridor's growth trajectory. We thank our partners who collaborated with us to bring this project to life, and the executives who have joined today's launch from the featured companies, including Zoho, Tanshu Australia, Auto Ingress Circular Seed, 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐽, HCL Tech, Sunpure Extracts, FB India, Wipro, Persistent Systems, Space Machines Company, 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, Power Ledger, 𝐈𝐧𝐝, Canva. We also acknowledge the presence of trade commissioners and distinguished attendees from federal and state governments and industry. Now, across the 30 companies and 30 partners, the stories were different, but the lesson was really consistent. Cross-border success is rarely about ambition, it is about judgment. Judgment about when to move, when to pause, and when to let local teams lead. Judgment about partners chosen for capability, not convenience, and judgment about building credibility before chasing scale. So the interactions categorically showed us the challenges, the chaotic nature of engagement, and how it is important to build the capacity and the capabilities in these companies. So in response, we have decided to create a platform designed to help SMEs and larger companies navigate this complexity by strengthening judgment, sequencing decisions, and intervening before commitments are made. A platform created to solve the decision problem that sits between ambition and execution. We are calling this the Advantage Network. The patterns that we are constantly seeing is in the case studies compendium that across sectors and markets the same issues came up again. Organizations were not short of ambition, but they were unclear which stakeholders actually mattered. Generic market assumptions were applied in a highly regional market like India. Funding pathways were unclear. Regulatory complexity surfaced late, and many organizations lacked the internal capacity to translate policy or trade settings into action. So understanding of how the trade agreement actually translates itself into tangible gains. What really goes wrong? So what typically happens next is predictable. Partners are brought in too early, pilots begin before readiness exists, and execution accelerates before risk is properly understood. So what exactly is the real problem? That's why we were very clear about one thing, that expansion into complex markets is not a networking problem, it is a decision problem. Conversations need context, relationships need sequence, and execution needs readiness. What's missing for many organizations is a structured environment to pause, to test before commitment, to interrogate risk before execution, and to decide whether and how to move before momentum takes over. Without this, decisions are driven by pace, pressure, and rather than judgment. The Advantage Network, what the Advantage Network is, it's built to address this gap. It is a decision-grade intelligence and access platform designed to intervene before commitments are made. It puts structure before action, judgment before engagement, and access behind readiness. It's about designing well. Who it is for? The network is built for decision-accountable organizations operating in complex markets where capital is at risk, reputation matters, and reversibility is limited. How it is structured? Structurally, it is simple. There are 3 layers created to address the needs. First is intelligence to establish clarity, relationships to be sequenced deliberately, and access only where readiness is established. The purpose of this exercise is that companies are not doing random networking, it's very targeted, and companies have an understanding of who to engage with. What to do next? Having worked for many years at the intersection of policy, industry, and execution across these corridors, this pattern repeats very often, and the right next step for us is to really explore it, and we request people in the room to scan this QR, go and check for yourself what exactly is Advantage Network. If you're interested to join this network, it's an invitation only, but companies are most welcome to share their details, talk about the challenges that they are facing, and if it resonates with you, please register your interest and we'll take it from there. That's the Advantage Network. On that note, I'm delighted to now transition to panel, where you will hear directly from the leaders who are part of the companies featured in this compendium, but also who are very closely seeing what really happens in the Australia and the India market. May I now request the panelists to join us on the panel. 𝐁𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, Head of South Asia at Australian Trade and Investment Commission, who has recently been awarded the Public Service Medal by the Government of Australia in recognition of his outstanding contribution to public service. 𝐁𝐮 brings rare depth to his role with extensive experience across Southeast Asia and now South Asia. He has a front row view of how companies engage across Australia, across very different regional markets. Gino Nagar, Global Mission Engineering Lead, Space Machines Company. Space Machines SMC is Australia's orbital servicing leader. operating a hub-and-spoke model where India provides R&D, component manufacturing, and a supply chain of over 250 transitioned ISRO-grade vendors. Their flagship Space Met-3 mission will launch on India's SSLV in 2026 this year with a 450 kg Optimus spacecraft, the largest Australian-designed satellite ever built. Sagari Chatterjee, India's education lead from Canva. Canva is one of Australia's most successful global tech company, and India has become central to how it designs tests and skills for the world. Founded in Sydney, Canva is now used by over 260 million monthly users globally, including 95% of the Fortune 500. India is its fourth largest and fastest growing market, where Canva has built deep in-country teams to localize language, templates, pricing, and AI-enabled product features for mobile-first multilingual user base. Innovations here in India are now shaping Canva's global product strategy. Sumit Joshi is the head of business excellence at 𝐈𝐧𝐝. 𝐈𝐧𝐝 Technologies is one of India's leading advanced robotics and warehouse automation companies. It was founded in 2016. 𝐈𝐧𝐝 employs over 900 specialists and delivers AI-enabled robots, automated storage systems, and warehouse software to more than 300 clients globally. Operating one of the world's largest mobile robot manufacturing facilities, and with active operations across the US, Europe, and Australia, 𝐈𝐧𝐝 represents a new generation of Indian industrial technology companies, engineering-led, globally competitive, and built to perform in high-standard markets. So the purpose of the conversation today is to understand from these companies and also from Australia how they guide the companies to venture in India and Australia markets, but the experience of the companies, what they have done, what they have achieved, what are the pain points, and what they would advise to their peers. So I'll start with you. And what has been your experience since the signing of the ECTA and the execution of the ECTA? What has really changed in the market going forward?
Thanks, Natasha. Congratulations to you and wishing you former trade and success in this meeting. I thought that the event in general is a resounding success. It's very good to be here with my colleagues, Andrew Carter, who's our Trade Investment Commissioner responsible for investment, and Nathan Davis, who's our Trade Investment Commissioner responsible for defence, advanced manufacturing, and space. So, Natasha, I want to frame our response by really breaking it down into three key areas. The first is the criticality of demand creation. There is no day where I would say our phone rings and there is a natural demand and interest to expand offshore. It has to be cultivated. And it is cultivated as a result of a lot of effort on the part of not just Australia, but our partners in the ecosystem back in Australia, who have to really provide a sense to Australian businesses of why India should be, as you said, an informed choice for them. But as I often say, as part of a highly contested global opportunity set for them. So Australia's largest investment partner is the US. Australia's largest trading partner is China. Southeast Asia is a major Australian government priority. We've just signed a trade agreement with the Middle East. Australian companies have a tremendous amount of choice, in addition to being exceptionally successful in Australia and in adjacent markets such as New Zealand. So we speak a lot about the competition in India, but there's tremendous competition in Australia for the attention of Australian companies. So the first thing that we do is really demand creation. It takes a lot of time and effort to secure the interest of Australian companies, to look at opportunities in India, and we keep that broken down by sectors. And so in the last 12 months, it's been fantastic to see that we've successfully been able to work with 1,200 Australian companies. That was just 300 to 400 about 3 to 4 years ago. It's gone up to 1,200 now. Australian companies across agribusiness, food and consumer, across defence, advanced manufacturing space, across technology, across education, and across the green economy, to really come to India and look at opportunities in their very specific domains in this market. And so we've been, for example, the partner country in the last 12 months at Indian Energy Storage. We brought our best clean energy companies to India to participate, and Nathan and team led that. We were the partner country in the Bangalore Tech Summit, very, very significant. And we also, as you know, Natasha, this week we have 16 Australian institutions here participating at the QS Summit and participating at Bilateral. I was at the QS Summit, and it was quite extraordinary. I want to share this with everyone, of the progress that's been made as a result of ECTA. Just one example. This is in education, but we've had tremendous success in agribusiness, which has been the main beneficiary of ECTA. But I just want to speak about the progress here. We have 140,000 Indian students studying in Australia. That's grown tenfold since the early 2000s. I was on a panel with a group of high commissioners from Europe, and they were speaking in the low thousands, and they were very, very good. We have 140,000. There were examples in the tens of transnational education partnerships. We have 450 transnational education partnerships involving Australian universities with Indian partners, joint degrees, PhD programs, industry engagement. It's a tremendous depth. So a lot of effort goes in through those missions to raise awareness, and we do that with our partners, with the Business Council of Australia, with the Industry Chamber of Commerce here, with the Tech Council, and with all of our major peak bodies. So the second thing I just want to say very quickly is once you create that demand and that awareness and that interest, you have to convert it to very targeted services, much like your network advantage that you've developed. Osprey has a very focused 9-box matrix of the delivery of market entry advice, connections to customers, and then regulatory support. And this is the core work that colleagues such as Nathan and others who are trade focused lead every single day. So when Nathan was leading our green economy team, in the last 12 months, he had 300 companies just in clean energy, sustainable mining, circular economy, in infrastructure, who were looking at close transactions, right? And so that is the heart of the demand satisfaction piece, but ultimately you've got to create and capture value. Right? So the success we've seen on the ECTA is that if you go back a few years, and Dhillon will know this really well, he's been on this journey for a very long time, the two-way trading relationship was stuck at about 30 billion for a very long time. It's crossed 50 billion, it's about 52 billion. And one of the reasons for that is because, yes, we've been able to raise money, yes, we've been able to deliver good services, but we've been able to ensure that we've been able to work closely with companies to realize opportunities into commercial outcomes. That's why it's gone to 53 billion. So tremendous amount of success over the last 3 years, but it's the result, I would say, of really 25 years of effort, of preparation to get companies to understand the opportunity.
Thanks, Mukul, that came through clearly also in the kind of work that's happened in the compendium in terms of the interactions with the companies and the company's journey of what they had to say about the ecosystem enablers and the role that Australia and state governments and federal agencies have played in making it happen for them. Over to you, Gino. We had Rajesh who joined us in the Sydney launch of the compendium, and he's really looking forward to this big one that's due with ISRO this year. Tell us a bit about Space Machines Company for the audience here, and what exactly are your aspirations? What led to this India opportunity? What was the core strategic reason for you to enter this market?
So, Space Machines is an Australian headquartered space technology company which is working in space servicing and satellite protection and sustainability. So we develop and operate satellites and spacecrafts which are highly maneuverable. They are capable to inspect, service and protect satellites across orbits. Our main focus is to make space operations resilient by responding to threats or risks in matter of hours rather than months. Now talking about why we entered India. So India, because when we entered India, we saw there's a lot of potential and the space ecosystem was booming. And around that time, in 2020-2021, India's space reforms made it clear that private players had a big role to play. And around that time, we saw a strong alignment of a long-term vision of sustainable space operations. So, and of course, Rajesh, he has strong ties with India, and this benefited him to realize that India can provide easy access to high-quality engineering talent and capable supply chain. So these factors made India a natural strategic choice for us.
Thanks, we're very glad that the Australian company is making its mark in the Indian space market. Sumit, I think it's a very interesting case study for us. You were featured in our first edition, and the success that you have received in the Australian market, and of course you're trying to do more in the ANZ market. Tell us a bit about IIFT's media operations. It's massive. We know the number of global fans you have for the audience about the company, and what exactly are your aspirations in the Australian market? What led to that venture?
So let me first paint a picture about what Agrawal does. You already mentioned that we are in the warehouse automation. So if you've ever bought during the Amazon Big Billion Day sale or the Great India sale, chances are that your parcel would have passed to an Agrawal warehouse solution. Okay? If you bought a packet of Lay's, you bought Marigold's coconut oil, parachute coconut oil, or if you bought Maggi, or if you bought Sunfeast pasta, chances are your packet, the local grocer from you who bought it, the parcel would have come through an Agrawal solution. If you own a Royal Enfield bike and you send it for repairs, the chances are the spare part would have once stored in an Agrawal solution. If you have ever ridden a Honda Activa two-wheeler, chances are now that it was assembled on an AMR or a robot made by Agrawal. So that's the kind of automation we are doing. In Australia, if you have bought an Adidas sportswear or a footwear, Australia or New Zealand, there is a 100% chance that that parcel would have been stored sometime and retrieved through an Agrawal automated storage and retrieval system. If you ever bought online on a Myer website, Myer Retails, chances are your parcel would have passed through our solution. So that's the kind of work we are doing in India and abroad. What led us to go to Australia? Actually, when we started scaling up, and this was a little later in 2020. So Australia was always a preferred geography, apart from obviously US. What actually attracted us to Australia, the need of the customer there, because the manual cost of labor was extremely high. We were regulatory and safety compliance which was stringent. And that, along with the COVID pandemic, really opened up the need for automation worldwide. So that provided us sweet spots for the customer to experiment with a startup in India. That was our first step in Australia.
You call yourself a startup?
We are a 9-year-old startup. We think like a startup, but we are a global company.
Yes, it is a global company, and Sumit is very humble about it. Last month, Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited your robotics facility in Noida.
No, that was inaugurated by Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Modi has interacted with our management multiple times, and there is one question he asks is, how much of this is made in China, how much of this is made in India? So we're still trying to figure out how to increase the India component.
Okay. And it'd be great to really increase that component going forward.
Of course.
And see more Australia traction.
Our management is very clear. We are made in India, made for the world. That concept we are looking. While we have sales and project execution and after sales teams across the world, the manufacturing facility will continue to be in India. That's the time I think.
And we have a mantra as well. We say design in Australia, made in India for the world, especially with the range of partnership models we are looking at. Sanri, we all are big fans of Canva, and that will be an understatement. We all use Canva. What is Canva's investor?
Right, I think the best way to frame this is that the presentation that you just saw some time ago was actually different from you. But I will actually talk only specifically about Canva education. Canva education currently has around 3 million monthly activation. We work with over 25,000 school systems. We have a national MOU with NCERT. We work very closely with the Ministry of Education. We have 6 MOUs with state education departments, and we're about to sign a few more. it was very obvious move for an Australian company like Canva to come to India with the national education policy coming into force. The national education policy harps about the need for activity and skill-based learning, and Canva education actually brings just that. We are working very, very closely with the government system to ensure that our platform is 100% curriculum aligned. Every subject, every grade that is taught, when the child opens the book and sees those topics and then opens it on Canva, they see the exact topic. We are actually working very, very closely with a few publishing houses to also implement QR codes in the textbooks so that they can scan those QR codes and it redirects them to Canva. Canva's growth journey has just begun, and I think an Australian company which has the global standards already set blends in very well in India, because India brings that scale and that intent that Canva is thriving on right now.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that we often say that your global product strategy actually designed in India for the world.
That is true, that is true. We have a tagline as well that, there's a design work, which means that everything that we build in India stays in India and then eventually reaches the masses.
That deserves a clap. Mukund, from Austria's vantage point, if we get into the execution risks, where companies you believe most often misjudge execution risk, regulation, partners, time frames, talent? What, in your opinion, are really the core issues which companies must be aware of as they ask these ones?
So I'll focus my comments on Australian companies entering the Indian market. But if anyone has an interest on those very same questions on Indian companies entering the Australian market, then Amrita is the best person to speak to, because he's worked with Adverb and other companies to support them to enter the Australian market. So there are a number of points here, Natasha, but I'll focus on three key ones. From an execution perspective, the two that come up perhaps the most. The first is pricing. Pricing is the number one thing. It's the biggest transition Australian companies will make when they bring their products and services into the market. It's how do you price in this market? Australia is a low volume, high margin market, and our companies are highly profitable, and so they're fantastic at driving high margin strategies based on differentiation and quality. Quality is still appreciated, of course, in India, but it has to be done at scale. We have to really, therefore, revisit your pricing proposition. That is probably the hardest transition that Australian companies have to make. The second key one in execution is really assessing counterparties. So you put up those four business models, and they're absolutely spot on. If we work through our sectors of work, you'll see a good critical mass of all four of those business models. So the counterparty risk, whether it is a distributor or a customer for your product or service, or whether it is a joint venture partner, the level of commercial due diligence that Australian companies do coming into the market, is variable. And so what we have to do at Australia is always try and reduce that variability to ensure that they work with us. Right? So we have 85 people right across the region, and over 90% of our team are exceptional, locally engaged colleagues. So I've got my colleague Rahul here. Rahul's in the investment team, but like Rahul, we have a very large group of exceptional individuals who come from the private sector, who understand Australian capability, understand the Indian regulatory system, have great relations with customers, and therefore can help assess the risk of counterparties. But Australian companies, if they don't use us, so that's partly on us, that we have to raise awareness of where they're to help them. But also Australian companies, I say to them, you should have great confidence to come to us, because if we can help you, we will help you. And if we can't help you, we'll tell you we can help you, right? So there's a humility, I think, that we try to bring in what we do. I think the second thing is regulatory. And in terms of regulatory, it's one thing to speak about ECTA, but it's another thing, depending upon the category, for instance, in agri-food, to ensure that the tariff benefits actually do flow from an administrative standpoint. One senior leader always says to me, it's one thing to think that you know what the processes are from a customs perspective. It's another thing to actually know what it is. So you've got to go through the process a few times to ensure that you don't actually have hurdles. And then the final point I'll make in the interest of time is talent. So, we have about 150 Australian companies that have a physical presence in India, which is a very good thing, broken across sectors. Many have set up innovation centers, R&D centers here. And there's a bit of a myth that, India has obviously a lot of talent, engineers and science graduates, and that's great, but there's great demand for it, right? So Australian companies currently have to compete to actually attract that talent. So if you go to Bangalore, yes, we have about 30 global capability and innovation centers there, but those centers are competing with US brands and European brands, and depending upon the area of work that's being undertaken, especially if it's at the, product engineering, software engineering, and data science and AI, it's incredibly hard to attract, let alone retain that talent. So the talent strategy for India requires a lot of work. It isn't as simple as that there is a lot of talent. It's very hard to attract.
Absolutely, that's a great point. In fact, that was one of the key motivators for us to even collaborate with an academic institution like the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade that just been marked as one of the top, actually the #1 MBA college in the country. So that says a lot about the kind of caliber and talent that exists and how we capitalize on projects like these which are cross-border for them to understand what exactly are the expectations of Australian institutions, Australian employers, because when you are in the market, it's very different, and that's been a key reason for us to engage as well. Now, let's talk about problems, because we often hear every time the good stories, it was easy, it was done. What were the key challenges for you when you entered this market? Any partnerships, any pivots that you had to take just to make sure that the language spoke?
So one of the key challenges that we faced was export controls while working across India and Australia. So sharing of data, knowledge, or even engineering work across countries requires a lot of planning. And in the beginning, we underestimated as to how much collaboration will be required to get export controls. But however, we mitigated this by engaging with partners and making sure that these challenges are included in our program timelines. Now, once that was done, it became smoother for us. So export controls was one of the biggest challenges for us.
For you, Sumit, in Australia, what are some of the key challenges that you are facing in the market and you feel that you can do something?
So I think the biggest challenge we face and we still face is the perception that Indian products are not high quality. We've been there for around 5-6 years now, and we've now realized the pecking order is European brands are best, then Chinese, and then Indian. The others will come somewhere new. That's one perception we have to break, and I think we realized that early. Our management, when interacting with the agency or with Australia, we realized that. And what we did was we had a clear quality management system in place which governed the way we made our products or designed our products and installed them and commissioned them. So that process and system was there. Our quality management runs on two principles. One is that quality is always a journey, it's not a destination. So once you reach a goal, you take another goal which is higher and better. And our management believes, and all the senior leaders believe, that the bottleneck is always at the top, So they keep thinking how they can do differently, how can they empower the team down the line to take the right decisions in terms of quality and the right decisions for the customer's interest. So I think these two philosophies govern the way we have handled our product quality and the way we have handled our interaction with the customers. This still continues to be one area of concern where we really have to go above and beyond.
That's very interesting, something I want you to go a little bit deep into it. We always talk about relative comparison, how companies have done in other markets vis-a-vis how they're doing in Australia. Now, if you were to explain how you established yourself in European markets, in American markets, because this particular insight that it's difficult to establish the product quality in the market and where you get that ranking. How have you understand? Is this true? Yes, this for you. Is this true for other markets as well, or it's just very essential to Australia?
No, it is true everywhere. Also, the buying decision of companies outside India is different. They are a B2B company, so there has to be a decision-making unit. Multiple people are involved in taking a decision. So the capex approval that they are doing. So multiple people are involved. So who are the key influencers? Who are the gatekeepers? Who are the decision makers? Who are the approving authorities? That understanding we should have when we enter a new market. And that's where a company like yours can help the companies entering, let's say in Australia, to understand how the decision, the buying behavior of the customer is. And that can really help a company go a long way in terms of reducing the sales cycle time. So our sales cycle time could be anywhere between 6 months to 1.5 years before we get the project. We meet the customer multiple times, and the design is iterated multiple times before we get the customer's approval, the purchase order. So the cycle time can reduce if we know the buying behavior before we enter the market. Also, our hit rate can improve. If we're talking to 15 customers or let's say 10 customers, our hit rate will be 1 if we don't know the buying behavior. But if we know the buying behavior prior, we can convert more customers, more prospects into customers. I think that is an important aspect when we enter the market like Australia and maybe also Europe.
And these are the key challenges you also came across when you were doing Compendium primary and secondary research, and that's been a key purpose for us to launch the Advantage Network platform also to address some of the key issues. Sagri, Canva is very big, but it's not happened for you overnight. So what has been some of the market challenges that you had to go through, and you would want other companies to do?
I think the biggest challenge, especially for an edtech company like Canva, is the fact that we have to deal with the digital divide. Digital literacy currently in India is at about 56%, as per the Press Information Bureau's report, which means that there are a lot of folks who are yet to understand what digital learning means. That's part A. Part B is the fact that internet connectivity. Canva works best when you have internet. And that has also been a very big factor. The rural-urban divide is extremely stark. Probably 61% of urban population have internet access and 25% of rural population have internet access. So in a situation like that, how do you work and ensure that we're not just catering to the private school systems, but we also ensure that public school systems also benefit from Canva. So the best way to work is a partner-led execution. So we have a global partnership with Google. We work very, very closely with Google, and the moment we work within the state education department, we also ensure that via Google or in some state education departments, like we recently signed an MOU with the Gujarat government last week, where Microsoft is very big. They've already set their base there. So we reach out to Microsoft and let them know that, hey, we have signed a partnership with this education department. Would you want to help us, set the ecosystem? So in one way or the other, we are not just working in the edtech sphere, we are also setting the larger ecosystem that the students or other edtech companies will benefit out of.
Excellent, Sagri. And if I have to take final comments, I'll start with you, Sagri. As an Australian company, what is the biggest misperception you would say companies need to drop about India?
I think one misperception is that India is actually not a product-led market, it's a policy-led market. We have to align with the policies, the government core policies, the national narratives, if we want to survive and sustain in India. We have done the same. We have aligned with the national education policy, the skill development policies, and molded our Canva offering in one way that it's very different from how you see it in Indonesia or in Philippines or even in Australia. So the way Canva education works in India is very, very different. That's one. And secondly, with Canva Pro and Canva different versions of licensing, we have also noticed that India is a very price-sensitive market. It is a price-sensitive market, and also the fact that what they're paying for, they look at the impact as well as the outcome. So we have to change and mold the entire pricing model when we enter India. So advice and suggestions is that when you're working with India, you have to prioritize the fact that you have to ensure that you build the trust of the system and not think about speed.
If you were to talk about yourself to the Australian audience, what is it that they should absolutely know about Agrawal and listen?
Agrawal is a high-quality product company. We have demonstrated to the world that we can do large, complex projects. We can design manufacture, install and commission and deliver the throughput that you want. We've done it multiple times. In fact, right now when we're talking, in Mumbai we are launching India's first humanoid. So you'll probably see on LinkedIn and the other social media how we've launched it. So we have a quadruped now. We've gone outside the warehouse now in terms of automation. We've launched a quadruped where we're looking at defense. The humanoid comes today. We have the robotic arm which is used for welding and we can place in various applications. So we've gone now outside the warehouse, maybe into the factory and beyond. So that is something to look out for from our works.
Thanks, Sumit, and best wishes for your expansion to Australia. One comes from you. Any practical advice for companies entering your sector in India?
So one practical advice is to secure a local partner early on in the market that you're entering. Local partners, they help with the processes, operational realities, and so there are companies who are great in execution, and there are new companies who are innovative and agile towards space applications. So it's very critical to find the right balance between innovation and execution. And lately we've been working with Austrian Space Agency, FTA, Australia, and also investing in South Wales. So that's my advice.
Excellent, thanks, Dhillon. Final comments from you. Govind, what is it that Australian companies must know about India and Indian companies must know about Australia to enter these markets?
So when it comes to saying companies in India, I've shared a few points, but I'll make one key point. I think one of the key things that I'm a great pains to highlight is that Australian companies get a little bit nervous when there's a reference to we need to take a long-term approach, because a long-term sounds like it could be eternity, and they get very nervous about that. Particularly if they're listed companies, they've quarterly, they've got typically quarterly investor meetings, they've got half-yearly financial statements to report against, so they're under tremendous pressure. Private companies, yes, they might bring more patient capital, but they're not that patient that the long term could be eternity. So one of the key things I always try and understand with companies in Australia and around the world, when they've allocated capital to India, or a wholly owned subsidiary, or a joint venture, or an acquisition, just how long it took them to actually be profitable. And what is often revealing is that often they're very profitable from about that 4%. So it's not eternity, and I've seen that across manufacturing, I've seen that across various areas of tech, and I've seen that across education as well. So I think it's quite important to be able to see quite specific terms. So what is the short term, what is the medium term, and then what is the long term? And in your pitch perfect compendium, you speak to time frames. And I think those time frames are very important to be actually able to connect it to the period to which we want to be profitable. So that's one of the key things. I think for Indian companies going to Australia, I think the number one thing I would say, and Andrew is a better place to speak to this, is that it always surprises me when I speak to companies around the world that have invested in Australia, that Australia is often in their top 5 markets globally. So if you look at a lot of US multinationals, European multinationals, Australia is often their top 5. And one of the reasons for that is because the top end of the town, which is very, very includes a number of very large companies with an exceptional capacity to acquire world-class products and services, and a great capacity to pay for those services. And therefore, Australia is one of the most profitable markets in the world. Even though it's a small market, the capacity to pay is really important. Right? So the capacity and the willingness to pay. So those are the two criteria, and they're two separate things. You can have the capacity to pay, but if you don't want to pay, it's not very good. So Australia is a tremendous market. The second thing I'll say is regulatory. Right? So political risk in Australia, the regulatory uncertainty is exceptionally low relative to many countries. I've been in Southeast Asia, and a big focus for us is partners for Southeast Asia strategy. It's how can you navigate political risk? So you can spend a lot of time thinking about, infrastructure fund guarantees, or thinking about political risk insurance. You don't have to spend as much time thinking about that. So there's tremendous policy certainty and regulatory certainty, and that's something that we get quite consistently as feedback, even from Indian investors.
Thanks, Govind. So, categorically don't let skepticism and anecdotal assumptions stop you. Go into the market led by business literacy, awareness of the market, and that's the key purpose for us to invest 18 months of our time to come to this pitch perfect compendium. And because there's so much talk about cricket, so I might as well close this panel session with a little anecdote of mine as well, which is the pitch is ready for those who are patient, read the conditions carefully, settle down for long innings, nurture dependable partnerships, and most importantly, do not fall for spin. So, thank you very much for joining us, and I may request Preeti to hand over the information space.
So, ladies and gentlemen, as we come towards the end of a fascinating session today, it's my privilege as a member of the Rajesh Board, Newland Global Group, to deliver this vote of thanks that I've been asked to do. It has been a fascinating launch for the Australia-India Business Case Studies Compendium, the second edition. So let me start by expressing deepest gratitude to everyone who made this compendium possible. And I believe this project is the outcome of 18 months of collaboration, contribution from across the corridor. Let me begin by acknowledging Newland Global Group's joint partner, the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Their rigor and the work of their research team, which is led by IIFT's management scholars, is integral to building the depth of this compendium. Thanks are due to Professor Rajesh, of course, Professor Petal, Professor 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, and their outstanding management scholars. To the 30 case study companies, quite a few of them are here today, including Zoho, 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐚, 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 𝐂𝐻𝐿, Sunpure Extracts, FBE India, Wipro, Persistent Systems, Space Machine Company, Canva, Energy Exemplar, Power Ledger, Intravision, Sicona. Thank you for your time, energy, and the data that you invested in this work. And we are deeply grateful to you for taking the time to work through a 33-question questionnaire to sit with Newland Global Group for in-depth interviews. And your lessons have given this compendium the depth and the credibility. To the 30 institutional ecosystem and strategic partners across government, industry bodies, institutions and research teams, thank you for the valuable inputs and the intellectual honesty you brought to every discussion. The strategic partners, including High Commissioner of India in Agrawal, Investment New South Wales, Government of Tamil Nadu, HSBC, RSM Australia, University of Sydney, 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐼𝐚 Group, Business New South Wales, Government of Maharashtra, Connex, Commonwealth Bank of Australia. We thank you. Also, we are very grateful, of course, to His Excellency Mr. Philip Dean, OEM, Australia's High Commissioner to India, who joined us today. His presence powerfully reinforces the significance of the Australia-India engagement at both the industry and institutional levels. We also extend our sincere thanks to the team at the Australian High Commission and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade for their continued engagement and valued support of this project. We are deeply grateful to Mr. Petal, Dhillon, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and colleagues at the Commerce Ministry for their meaningful engagement, their guidance, and their continued support. We also sincerely acknowledge the support extended to the High Commission of India in Canberra and the Consulate General of India in Sydney whose ongoing engagement has been instrumental in advancing this initiative. Thanks to 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐿, thank you very much, Head of South Asia and Australia and his team for joining us today and for contributing practical trade and investment insights to the discussion. We extend a sincere thanks to industry leaders, state government commissioners and their executives, NASSCOM, 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐽𝐿, members of Federation of Indian Export Organization, EO, the Export Promotion Council for EOUs, and 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐧𝐝𝐢𝐚, Automotive Components Manufacturers Association of India, Petal, Confederation of Indian Industry, Service Export Promotion Council, the Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce, as well as representatives from federal and state governments for being part of today's dialogue. And finally, to everyone who is present with us, thank you for joining us, for your continued support and for the role that we each play in strengthening the Australia-India corridor. And we look forward to working with all of you in the months ahead. So again, on behalf of Newland Global Group, thank you once again to all our partners, to contributors, and to the guests. And I hope you enjoy reading this compendium. And more importantly, I hope it serves you well on your journey across the India-Australia corridor. Thank you. And after the vote of thanks, I believe, I've been asked to invite you to join us for lunch and networking. Do you have a vote of thanks? Thank you.
I would request Dr. Petal to come to the stage for a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agrawal. Ladies and gentlemen, in cricket, when India and Australia step onto the pitch, the air thickens with anticipation. It's fierce, it's competitive, and every run is hard earned. But today, we are not here to watch a contest. We are here to celebrate something far more powerful: collaboration. The 𝐀𝐮 Compendium Pitch Perfect and its launch captures this spirit, where ideas, institutions, and industries come together to create knowledge that transcends boundaries. As we come close to today's program, it's a proud privilege to propose vote of thanks for this special occasion from IIFT Delhi. At the outset, I extend my sincere gratitude to our chief guests and distinguished dignitaries for sparing their valuable time and for enriching the event with their insightful presence. I would also like to express our sincere thanks to industry partners, contributors, and collaborators whose real-world experiences and thought leadership form the backbone of this compendium. This work truly reflects the spirit of collaboration between academia and industry that bridges deep theory with practice and in the most meaningful way. My special gratitude to Professor 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐴, Vice Chancellor IIFT, who proactively took the initiative to organize this launch, demonstrating exemplary leadership and a deep commitment to academic and research endeavors. I also thank 𝐿𝐿 and Natasha from NGG for collaborating with IIFT. My special appreciation also goes to our 40 MBA students who authored and the editors of this book, Professor 𝐂𝐮𝐬𝐢𝐴, Natasha, and the entire academic team, whose rigorous effort, intellectual commitment, and attention to detail have made this compendium both relevant and impactful. My sincere appreciation to Shri Registrar IIFT, and his team for their invaluable administrative support, which ensured the smooth planning and execution of this event. A word of thanks to our partners, sponsors, and institutional collaborators for their trust and support, and to the organizing team and colleagues whose behind-the-scenes efforts ensured the seamless execution of today's event. Finally, I thank our faculty members, students, researchers, and all participants for being an engaged and enthusiastic audience. A special thanks to Dr. Arunima and Dr. Divya for making this event successful. With this, I once again thank everyone, and I would request you all to join us for the lunch in the atrium. Thank you.